The first thing the dandy does is unsettle the room quietly. Without effort, without apology. He does not enter seeking permission to be noticed. Nor does he demand attention. Attention finds him. It slips toward him instinctively, confused, curious, slightly undone. There is something about the way he moves that resists definition. Something in his presence that refuses to settle into the neat categories the world depends on to feel safe. He does not perform masculinity the way it has been prescribed. Nor does he abandon it. He bends it, softens its edges, sharpens its allure. He borrows from femininity without surrendering dominance, adorns himself without losing command. He is contradiction made elegant. And because the mind cannot place him, desire begins to work overtime. Most people live inside narrow scripts, strong or gentle, assertive or graceful, masculine or feminine. We learn these roles early, and we cling to them because they offer belonging. The dandy threatens this entire structure not through rebellion, but through freedom. He moves as if the rules were suggestions, as if identity were a palette rather than a prison. And this is what stirs the deepest hunger. To encounter the dandy is to feel something long suppressed begin to stretch. A curiosity that has no name, a desire that does not ask for permission. He awakens the part of the observer that once dreamed of being more fluid, more expressive, more alive. He reminds them without ever saying it that identity can be chosen, crafted, worn like silk and discarded like smoke. His appearance is never accidental. Every detail is deliberate, but never obvious. A line of fabric that clings where it should not. A color that challenges expectation. A gesture that lingers just a second too long to be innocent. He understands the power of surfaces not because they are shallow, but because they are the first point of contact between fantasy and reality. The dandy knows that seduction begins before touch, before words, before intent is even acknowledged. It begins in suggestion, in ambiguity, in the invitation to interpret. When he speaks, his voice carries layers, confidence without aggression, warmth without need. He listens as though he already understands something unspoken. He responds not to what is said, but to what is withheld. Around him, people feel seen in unfamiliar ways, not exposed but recognized. This is the dandy's quiet mastery. He does not force desire outward, he draws it inward. Those who encounter him begin to question themselves. Why does his presence feel intoxicating? Why does it feel liberating to be near him? Why does he awaken longings that have nothing to do with gender, and everything to do with expression? Because the dandy represents escape. Not escape from responsibility, but from rigidity, from the exhausting performance of being only one thing. In his presence, others sense the possibility of multiplicity, that they too might contain softness and strength, beauty and authority, elegance and danger all without contradiction. He flirts without pursuing, he invites without promising, he remains just out of reach, not because he is withholding, but because mystery is his natural state. The closer one tries to define him, the further he slips into fascination. He cannot be pinned down, and so he cannot be possessed. This uncertainty is electric. Desire thrives in spaces where certainty dissolves. The dandy understands this instinctively. He becomes a living question mark, a figure who refuses to resolve. And in that refusal, he creates tension sexual, psychological, aesthetic. People lean toward him not because they want him, but because they want to understand what they feel around him, and understanding never fully comes. He is careful never to explain himself. Explanation kills enchantment. He lets others project onto him what they need. Rebellion, freedom, beauty, danger, permission. Each person sees a different version of him, and all are true. He does not correct their interpretations. He lets them bloom. The dandy does not seduce by promising fulfillment. He seduces by awakening possibility. He reminds the world that identity is not fixed, that desire does not follow rules, that attraction often blooms in the spaces we were taught to ignore. By the time his presence settles into the mind, something irreversible has occurred. The observer no longer fits comfortably inside their old roles. They have seen too much, felt too much. They have tasted the allure of fluidity and the rigidity of their own. Identity now feels constricting. The dandy leaves them with a quiet ache, not for him but for themselves, for the version they might become if they dared to loosen the edges, if they allowed elegance where they were taught to be hard, mystery where they were told to be clear, beauty where they were told to be practical. He does not ask them to follow, He simply walks ahead stylish, ambiguous, unapologetically himself, knowing that once seen, he can never be unseen. And that is how the dandy begins his seduction. The dandy's seduction deepens not through escalation, but through refinement. Where others intensify, he sharpens. Where others chase, he rearranges the terrain so desire comes looking for him. By now, his presence has already unsettled expectations. What follows is not conquest, but contamination, the slow spreading of ambiguity into places once ruled by certainty. Those drawn to him begin to notice changes in themselves first. A restlessness, a heightened sensitivity. Familiar routines feel dull, almost insulting. Clothing once chosen for safety now feels restrictive. Gestures once automatic now feel rehearsed. The dandy has not told them to change, but he has made stagnation unbearable. He understands something most never learn. People do not crave permission. They crave permission without asking. The dandy never instructs, never persuades. He simply exists as proof that another way of being is possible. And that proof is intoxicating. When he desires someone, it is never obvious. He does not pursue directly, because pursuit implies hierarchy. Instead, he circulates. He allows proximity. He shares space. He lets his attention drift just close enough to be felt, then withdraws before it can be claimed. This creates an exquisite tension, not sexual alone, but existential. The question forms quietly, why do I want his attention so badly? Because his attention feels rare. He gives it selectively, not out of cruelty, but out of discernment. When he does focus on someone, the effect is destabilizing. He notices details others overlook, a hesitation in the voice, a contradiction between posture and speech, a hidden longing masked by politeness. He reflects these back subtly, almost playfully, as if revealing a secret they had forgotten was visible. In his presence, people feel both exposed and protected, seen without being judged, desired without being consumed. This duality is devastating. The dandy also understands the erotic power of style, not as ornament, but as narrative. Every choice he makes tells a story about freedom. His clothing does not shout rebellion, it whispers confidence. He blends textures, silhouettes, energies that should not belong together and yet they do. Masculine lines softened by delicate details, feminine elegance sharpened by restraint. He embodies balance without symmetry. This confuses desire in the most productive way. Those around him struggle to articulate what they feel. Attraction without labels, curiosity without clarity, longing without direction. The mind searches for explanation, but the body already knows. Something here feels alive, and the dandy allows this confusion to breathe. He never resolves tension too quickly. If a moment leans intimate, he lets it hover unfinished. If a glance lingers, he breaks it first. If a connection deepens, he redirects the energy elsewhere. Not abandoning it, but redistributing it. Desire becomes fluid, mobile, uncontainable. It spreads through the room, through conversations, through silence. This is not seduction aimed at possession. This is seduction aimed at awakening. The dandy knows that once someone experiences this fluidity, they can never fully return to rigid desire. They begin to crave not just him, but the feeling he awakens, the freedom to be undefined, to explore edges they were taught to suppress. To feel elegant, dangerous, soft, powerful all at once. Sexuality around the dandy becomes less about act and more about atmosphere. Touch is delayed. Anticipation is stretched. The erotic charge lives in implication, in restraint, in the space between what is expressed and what is withheld. He understands that desire grows strongest where it is allowed to breathe. And those who find themselves closest to him feel something unsettling. They are no longer sure who is seducing whom. They dress differently, speak differently, think differently. They catch themselves imagining versions of their lives that feel more expressive, more beautiful, more true. They begin to sense that identity itself might be an art form, something to be curated, revised, evolved. The dandy has not asked for devotion, yet devotion begins to form, not to him alone, but to the possibility he represents. A life less constrained, a self less obedient, a desire that does not apologize for its complexity. And as this realization settles, something becomes clear. The dandy is not dangerous because he will take you away from who you are. He is dangerous because he will show you who you could be. And once that vision takes hold, the old self starts to feel like a costume that no longer fits. By the time the dandy reaches the center of a person's inner life, resistance has already softened into fascination. What began as curiosity now feels like initiation. He has not crossed boundaries, he has dissolved them. The old lines between masculine and feminine, restraint and indulgence, self-control and display blur into something more fluid, more intoxicating. Around him, desire stops asking for definitions and starts asking for permission to expand. This is where his influence becomes unmistakable. Those closest to him feel as if they are learning anew language, once spoken not with words, but with posture, rhythm, silence. He teaches without instruction. A pause held just long enough to feel intentional. A smile that suggests understanding without revealing motive. A touch that never claims, only invites. He knows the erotic power of near enough to feel heat, distant enough to keep longing alive. The dandy does not hurry intimacy. He cultivates it like an atmosphere. He understands that what people want most is not release, but recognition, the feeling that their complexity is not only allowed, but desired. He listens for contradictions. He notices the soft confidence behind a hard exterior, the hunger hidden beneath elegance, the daring impulse buried under caution. And when he reflects these back, it feels like revelation. In his presence, people feel more themselves than they ever have, yet also more mysterious, as if they are discovering new versions of their own desire in real time. He encourages play, not performance. Play is dangerous because it loosens identity. When people play, they experiment, they risk, they step outside the roles they have rehearsed for years. The dandy creates spaces where this feels safe, where exploration is elegant rather than reckless. He offers no labels, only possibilities. No demands, only suggestion. And suggestion is his sharpest instrument. A glance that lingers just long enough to feel intentional. A compliment that praises something unconventional. An observation that reframes a perceived flaw as a hidden strength. He destabilizes self-perception in subtle ways, making people reevaluate not just how they are seen, but how they might choose to be seen. Desire around him becomes layered. It is no longer just sexual, it is aesthetic, psychological, existential. People want him, yes, but they also want what he represents. Freedom from rigidity, beauty without apology, identity without confinement. He becomes a mirror in which suppressed desires finally recognize themselves. The tension grows not because he escalates, but because he withholds resolution. He understands that clarity ends enchantment, so he keeps the narrative open. He allows moments to remain unfinished. He leaves gestures open to interpretation. Each interaction becomes a question mark, and the mind rushes to fill the space. This is where obsession quietly takes root. Not an obsession with possession, but with presence, with the feeling of being slightly undone, of standing at the edge of something undefined. The dandy becomes associated with possibility itself, and possibility is addictive. Once tasted, certainty feels dull. Those drawn into his orbit begin to feel braver. They experiment with their appearance, their voice, their expression. They permit themselves indulgences once dismissed as impractical or excessive. They allow softness where they were taught to be hard, boldness where they were taught restraint. They feel beautiful in unfamiliar ways, and the sensation lingers. The dandy watches this transformation without interference. He does not claim credit. He does not guide the process. He simply remains present, stylish, composed, ambiguous, allowing others to evolve around him. This restraint deepens his allure. He is not trying to change anyone. He is simply refusing to be fixed. And that refusal is magnetic. Sexual energy around him intensifies without ever becoming crude. Desire simmers rather than explodes. The anticipation is exquisite, drawn out, refined, elevated. He knows that longing thrives where imagination is allowed to roam. He feeds the imagination, then steps aside, letting fantasy do the rest. People begin to dream differently. Their fantasies grow more textured, more expressive. They imagine not just acts, but aesthetics. Not just touch, but atmosphere. Not just pleasure, but style. The dandy has taught them that seduction can be artful, that desire can be curated rather than consumed. And yet, beneath the elegance, there is danger. Because the dandy cannot be contained. The closer one tries to define the relationship, the more elusive he becomes. He does not disappear, but he does not anchor himself either. He remains fluid, resisting gravity. Those who seek certainty feel a subtle frustration begin to form. The very ambiguity that excited them now tests their need for clarity. This tension is deliberate. The dandy knows that his power lies not in staying, but in remaining undefined. He understands that to be fully claimed would be to lose the edge. That makes him irresistible. So, he maintains a delicate balance, present enough to inspire, distant enough to provoke longing. By now, those under his spell realize something unsettling. The dandy has changed them more than he has ever changed himself. He has opened doors inside them that cannot be closed. He has made rigidity feel impossible. He has introduced the idea that identity is not something to be defended, but something to be designed. And once that idea takes hold, life itself feels less fixed. The dandy has done what he does best, not by conquering, not by persuading, but by unsettling certainty. He has made freedom feel erotic, ambiguity feel powerful, self-expression feel dangerous and delicious. And as the tension reaches its peak, as longing sharpens into awareness, one question begins to surface quietly in the mind of those closest to him. What happens when the dandy decides to leave the room? The dandy's departure is never an exit, it is a reverberation. He does not announce it, does not draw attention to the moment when his presence loosens from the room. He simply shifts. A subtle reorientation of energy, a redistribution of focus. Those who were attuned to him feel it immediately, like a change in pressure, a hush after music fades. Something exquisite has moved on, and the absence is electric. He leaves behind no promises, no explanations, no tidy narratives. The dandy understands that clarity would betray the experience. What he offered was not resolution, but permission. Permission to live with edges softened and sharpened at once. Permission to reject confinement without needing to declare rebellion. Permission to be ambiguous and alluring on one's own terms. Those who encountered him now feel changed in ways they cannot fully articulate. Their posture carries an ease. Their gaze lingers differently. They have learned the power of suggestion, the elegance of restraint, the sensual authority of not explaining themselves. The dandy did not teach them how to seduce others. He taught them how to inhabit themselves more fully. This is his final seduction, because what he leaves behind is not longing for him, but longing for freedom. A freedom that feels aesthetic as much as emotional. A freedom that lives in choices once dismissed as frivolous. A line of fabric, a cadence of speech, a refusal to rush towards certainty. He has shown them that identity can be styled, that desire can be composed like art rather than consumed like appetite. And yet, there is a cost. For some, the dandy's influence becomes destabilizing. They crave the sensation of fluidity but fear the loss of structure. They attempt to mimic his ambiguity without understanding its discipline. They mistake ornament for intention, confusion for mystery. These are the ones who falter, who turn performance into disguise, and freedom into chaos. But the dandy never promised ease. He promised possibility. For those who truly absorbed his presence, the transformation is quieter, deeper. They learn discernment. They choose when to reveal and when to withhold. They understand that allure is not exposure, but control over what remains unsaid. They stop seeking validation through definition. They allow others to project, to wonder, to desire without instruction. The dandy's greatest mastery was never style alone, it was self-authorship. He refused to be reduced. He refused to be fixed. And in doing so, he made rigidity feel archaic. The world's categories, so desperate to classify, feel clumsy after him. In his wake, people feel an aversion to labels that flatten complexity. Sexuality, too, feels different now. Less urgent, more textured. Desire stretches beyond the act and into atmosphere. Anticipation becomes an art. The space between glances, the weight of pauses, the elegance of restraint, these become sites of pleasure. The dandy taught them that erotic power often lives in what is suggested, not what is delivered. He also taught them something rarer, that ambiguity can be generous, that refusing to define oneself does not withhold, it invites. It allows others to approach with curiosity rather than expectation, to desire without entitlement, to engage without possession. This is why the dandy does not linger. To stay would be to become familiar. Familiarity dulls ambiguity. Ambiguity is his essence. So, he moves on gracefully, stylishly, leaving behind a subtle recalibration of taste. People now recognize when something feels rigid, over-explained, desperate to be understood. They find themselves drawn instead to what breathes, to what shifts, to what resists capture. And when they encounter others like him, Rare figures who seem to exist. Between definitions they feel it instantly. A recognition, a spark, not of sameness, but of shared refusal to be confined. The dandy was never meant to be followed. He was meant to liberate. He does not demand imitation. He leaves behind influence, a refinement of desire, a confidence in contradiction, a permission to curate one's presence with intention and elegance, to be soft and sharp, visible and elusive, beautiful without explanation. Long after he has gone, his presence lingers not as memory, but as standard, a quiet whisper that surfaces whenever life begins to feel overly defined, overly obedient, overly dull. You could choose differently. And with that whisper comes a smile, knowing, stylish, and resolved. The dandy has done his work.